installing the Auto-Torq Axle Fastener, we have a tang that lines up with a keyway in your spindle. We're going to line those two up, and we're going to spin the axle fastener on until it touches the inner bearing journal. So once it touches, we're going to grab our axle socket and breaker bar. We're going to spin the axle fastener on until we hear a loud clutching mechanism within the axle fastener. Once we hear that, we're going to spin the hub. Spinning the hub is going to help seat the bearing, seat your seal. So we want to spin that a minimum of 360. Tighten the axle fastener again, spin the hub, tighten your axle fastener nut again, spin the hub. We actually want to do that process of tightening the axle fastener and spinning the hub a minimum of 5 times. So now the next process that we'd like you to do is a quick verification process. Is we're going to mark the spindle and the axle fastener with a paint pen. So we're going to draw a line across the end of the axle fastener and the spindle, and then we're going to grab our axle socket and a breaker bar again. We're going to spin the axle fastener another 360 degrees. And we're going to verify that that axle fastener has not moved. So now we know that the bearings are properly seated, the axle fastener is in the correct position. So the next thing we want to do is we want to check in play on this wheel end. So the Auto-Torq is actually shooting for a slight amount of preload. So in the last 30 to 40 years, the industry has been, putting wheel ends together in play. So this axle fastener is a little different. We're going to put that wheel end in a slight amount of preload. But we do want to verify that we do have 0 in play with a dial indicator, just to verify that it has been properly adjusted. So we're going to put a dial indicator on it. We're going to 0 it out. We're going to push in on the hub with a slight amount of force, about 40 to 50 pounds of pushing force while slightly oscillating. And then we're going to take a reading, and then we're going to pull out on the hub while doing the same thing, about 40 to 50 pounds of force. And we're going to verify that movement in the wheel end. We should have 0 movement in the hub, which tells me that I have the Auto-Torq axle fastener adjusted properly. So there is a SAE spec in the industry that talks about preload. It's J2535 that actually has a target on a TN, TP, and an R spindle of about 500 pounds of force with a maximum of 1,000 pounds of preload on a wheel end. So the Auto-Torq axle fastener is actually putting that wheel end in the optimal amount of preload, and all you got to do is just tighten the nut with a socket. So very easy to install, and even though the hub is in a slight amount of preload, the hub does turn very easy. There's a slight amount of drag on the hub, but does spin smooth and free with no binding.